Hello, everyone, and welcome to Raise the Vi with Liz. I'm your host, Liz Peterson, and today I'm going to be interviewing Dr. Deborah Zucker about her new book, The Vitality Map. So she's right here in Bellingham, Washington, which is fun to host a local person on the podcast. So for those of you who aren't aware of the book, The Vitality Map, or Dr. Deborah, she is a compassionate and experienced guide for individuals navigating life's most intense transitions. As a naturopathic physician, mental health counselor, health coach, and award-winning author of The Vitality Map, Deborah offers transformative women's circles, virtual coaching and counseling, retreats, and her signature program, Vital You. With her guidance, clients consciously design their unique transformation, embracing freedom, confidence, and ease as they learn to follow their heart toward healing and renewal. Connect with Dr. Deborah online at Vital Medicine. Dr. Deborah, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks so much, Liz. Glad to be here.
Yeah, pleasure to host
Yeah.
you. So let's jump right in. I always like to ask my guests, what was it that brought you to this moment right now, to writing this book? What was your journey?
It was a very personal journey. Yeah, the Vitality Map was born from my own healing journey that began in my 20s. I'm now 50. And it was that journey which initially began as chronic fatigue and depression and a host of other symptoms that yeah, it really felt like life was bringing me to my knees, that I no longer was able to guide myself in the way that I had been. And it required kind of a deepening from looking at the physical symptoms to dropping deeper into the emotional and the mental and the spiritual. And through that journey, I found my way to Bastyr University to study naturopathic medicine. And there, my healing journey kind of continued side by side with what I was learning through the training. And the 9 keys that I distill in the Vitality Map book really came from discerning what was missing in that education and what I was finding I needed in order to really overcome my own chronic illness and to heal and find my way towards more sustained resilience and vitality in my life.
Oh, I think all of us would really like that, especially these days. It's been so hard over these last few years, and a lot of people are complaining about chronic fatigue, different illnesses popping up, not being able to get out of their own way. As you talk about in your book, you have people coming to you with these various things that just keep repeating over and over again. So let's dive into like, why the chronic fatigue? What can we do if we're experiencing these things? What did you do, Dr. Deborah, when you realize I have this chronic fatigue? What do I do?
Yeah, well, I think, what I get at with the 9 keys is that, so many of us are navigating a bit in the dark when we're trying to care for ourselves. So we seek out lots of different healthcare professionals who may offer their advice or expertise, and we try all these different protocols and things to support us. And we might find, that some of that helps, hopefully it does. But that often there's something underneath that's missing. And it's really about our deeper relationship with our own self-care, with how we're tending to ourselves. And that we may find that we're lacking some of the skills, awareness, and capacities to really know how do I guide myself in a way that brings me more alive? How do I discern between all these different perspectives that are coming at me and find my way out of the burnout, out of the fatigue, out of this feeling of being stuck? And I know just through my own experience, it can be like yeah, incredibly frustrating and bring a depth of humility to, yeah, how and where and help, just like that sense of feeling so lost for how to navigate. And yeah, and I can speak to, some of the keys, which, I consider basic life skills. We were never taught, to take the shame out of it, to take that personalization that there's something wrong with me and actually realize like, oh, there's just some things I was never taught how to do and how to attend to myself.
That's interesting that you've discovered things that we were never taught. And in my aging and, working with clients, on a daily basis with intuitive healing work, I find that too. There's a lot of things that we were never taught that we have to teach ourselves, or a lot of things that were kind of taken out of society, out of the programming, that we receive from our parents or caregivers, or what was modeled to us, and discussions that were never had. You mentioned what's missing. So I kind of want to circle back around to that. And what did you find was missing?
Yeah, what was missing a lot of the time for me was, it's that sense of connection to my own autonomy and knowing. So, like when I began in my healing journey, I felt spun around all the time, and I felt confused about how to choose which approach to take, or how to even know, yeah, sort of what my body was trying to tell me. So one of the keys in my book, key number 3, is strengthening your self-awareness muscles. So in that way, it was like I didn't even know how to read or receive the feedback that my body and my being was giving me all the time, that was telling me like pretty clearly, but without having that language. I didn't learn that language. I didn't know what it was actually telling me, like, oh, like stop doing this, or see this over here, like this would really support you. But that feedback there is there 100% of the time, but we just don't know how to read it if we haven't learned how. So that's just one example.
What does that look
Um,
like? If we don't have that self awareness, how might it show up in our bodies?
Yeah, well, I like to think of it as like when we don't have that self-awareness, it can start off as like this little subtle whisper of like, oh, you might maybe not do so well, like, for example, eating that food, or you might, yeah, that form of exercise doesn't really feel so good. It's like it might start off really quiet, just these little voices or nudges. But then it's like when we don't hear the feedback, the symptoms and the feedback, like, we think of them as symptoms, or they might even get diagnosed as something that gets stronger and stronger. So for some of us, like myself, it might lead us to a depth of fatigue where it's hard to even get out of bed for many months. For others, it can show up as intense anxiety or depression. Chronic illnesses of all different kinds, I think, can be sort of that culmination of lots of symptoms, the stress that's just building, building, building that we haven't known how to attend to. Yeah, so what I'd like to say with the learning, as we learn these basic life skills, with this one in particular, it's like once you start to be able to learn the feedback, you can catch it when it's more like a whisper rather than waiting for like, when it feels like you just get knocked upside your head. Um, yeah.
Yeah, and that happens when we don't listen, for sure. Just a subtle stomach ache can turn into something else, like inflammation, joint pain, that sort of thing, the chronic fatigue that you were talking about. And you brought chronic fatigue up again, and that was part of your journey. And I want to kind of focus in on that because I like a real personalized approach. So, what do you feel like some of the causes were for you of the chronic fatigue, or what you're seeing in your patients?
Yeah. Yeah, well, I had two different rounds of intense chronic fatigue. First, in my early 20s, and then actually after I became a doctor, I had another round. Um, so I can kind of pull out, some of the different patterns that were there both times and speak to them. One, I think, is when we're not aligned in our lives with what brings us uniquely alive. So that's another key in the book, aligning with your yes. So when we might be sort of behaving or carrying out expectations from others, patterns that have been modeled for us that actually don't really serve us. So it's like we're investing all of our life energy in a job, a relationship, yeah, a particular yeah, pattern that actually doesn't serve us. So it's like we have a leaky bucket. It's like the life energy is just going out and leaking away rather than investing our energy where we get returns. So when we learn how to align with what actually brings us alive, it's like it's constantly supporting our own thriving, where we're investing our energy in our relationships, our work, our service, our learning. And when we don't do that, it's like it's a constant drain. So that's one element that I think is really key about chronic fatigue patterns that doesn't really get spoken about, because we can talk about the labs and the viral components that can be there and the foods and all of that's relevant. That's really important, to sort out what's aligned for us in those ways too. But at the deeper soul level, if we're living a life that's someone else's idea of what our life is supposed to be and who we're here to be, that's one of the ultimate, ways to drain our life energy. Yeah, and another element for me that's kind of related to that, that was significant for me in my chronic fatigue journey was from my upbringing, I didn't have modeling around expressing and acknowledging anger. And that can be true for many of us, I think particularly women in our culture, but for many of us where it's taboo. And along with that, like I hadn't really learned healthy boundaries, so that's another expression of that, of like actually finding my no, which is the flip side of finding my yes, being able to express it, feel it, move it, like stand in my power in that way. And, the pattern for me had been like when I would encounter that kind of feeling, I would collapse. And so that again was connected with more of the fatigue pattern. It's like it all just, collapsed down rather than actually being fuel for me to say, no, that's not okay for me. And this is what I want.
I'm really glad that you brought that up because that was part of my healing journey too, was tapping into those things that I wasn't being aware of, where I had given my power away or my boundaries were leaky. I didn't stand up for myself or have a voice for myself. And I really do feel like in healing, we have more than a 50% component in, the reason why we're feeling the way that I do, in emotion. So let's talk about that a little
Yeah.
bit, like how emotion correlates and relates to what's going on in our bodies.
Hmm.
Mm.
Yeah. It's like our minds like to separate it all out, right? And our language does that, mind, body, spirit, but really it's all one and the same thing. So, it's hard sometimes to grok that, but really it's like our emotions are an expression of our physical selves and vice versa. So, what's happening on one level is also happening on another level. It's just sometimes yeah, we're more attuned to one. Our awareness is more, able to acknowledge one more than the other. I think in our culture, it's shifting, but our culture, in terms of illness, is very physically focused. And so we get latched on to the physical symptoms, which, is part of the feedback and important to acknowledge, but also might not be tuned into, yeah, the underlying emotional components that are there as well, which are just a different expression of the same thing often.
Have you found in your practice that like certain emotions show up in specific areas of the body?
Mm, I, I haven't really tracked it that clearly in that way. Like can for myself. Um, Yeah, but I don't feel I don't feel qualified to really name that. I know there's some great books about that too. Yeah. But yeah.
Thanks,
Yeah.
Dr. Deborah. Okay, let's get into like aligning. We talked about aligning with your yes, and the opposite is finding your no. So, talk a little bit about that in your journey and how did you find your no? What did that look like for you?
hmm Yeah, I mean, one analogy that I really love for finding your no is pruning your life. So, it's the acknowledgement that it's like, our life energy, wants us to blossom and bloom. But if we're putting our energy, into things that are draining for us, it's like, like a fruit tree with those sucker branches that go straight up. And they're just taking all this energy from the tree, but they're not actually providing any flowers or fruits or anything like that. So the importance of pruning our life. So finding that no. And like I said, like for me, finding that the anger and that clear boundary no was huge for me. And I came into that in the second round of my chronic fatigue. And at the time, gratefully, I had found my way to a somatic psychotherapy group that I was a part of. And we would meet every 3 months for these intensive weekends. And it was there that I came to really discover what that felt like in myself and to be able to feel it and say it and move it. Not as like an against someone in particular, but as a really reclaiming of that energy in me. And once I kind of found it in that way, in a real bodily way, like the boundaries and the pruning became so much easier. And I think I even at this point take it for granted a bit, considering where I came from and the lack of modeling around that of just, yeah, just how just like there's choices throughout our days of having discernment and just what am I prioritizing? What am I standing for? How am I really owning my own autonomy and authorship in my life? And every single choice matters for that. And it's so easy to lose ourselves, through the expectations and demands of others, and to just keep coming back. And I often tell clients, like, if this is a new process for you, like, it's helpful just to pause, like take the time pressure off. If someone's asking something of you, like tell them you'll get back to them. Like pause, give yourself the time you need to find that inner discernment of whether it's an alignment or not. And it's like building any muscle too, like having the courage to say no and maybe have people get upset or feel uncomfortable, particularly if they're used to you always saying yes. And yeah, and to just move through that. And once you start doing that, the resistance is going to get lighter and lighter because it's going to, yeah, that pathway is going to be easier and there's going to be less need for, yeah, everyone to be pleased with you in those ways that maybe, maybe they have been or you thought they were. Yeah.
Yeah, I like that. Thank you, Dr. Deborah. And I like that little tip that you gave us to put in our toolkit to be able to take home with us. And, when you were, speaking to this, what kept on coming to mind for me was like that space where we're getting to see how we function. We're like, okay, I'm doing this because of this, or I'm saying yes to this because of that. And oh, I'm seeing I'm doing a little people pleasing over here, or whatever it might be, which is actually key number two that you talk about, like facing and embracing your shadows. And I think that that's really important in our personal growth journey to be able to see, okay, what are my shadows and how are they functioning in my life? So, can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, yeah. I think this is another really big missing piece, in our healing journeys. And thankfully it's becoming a bit more popular through the popularization of internal family systems and other parts work that basically is acknowledging, that we all have parts of ourselves, perspectives, identities that we're unconscious to, or that we've, maybe disowned or sort of shoved down in the deep dark corner of our internal basement, that we haven't either been able to hear or fully acknowledge, or that, yeah, we think it's not okay, that those parts are within us, that they're taboo somehow. And when those parts are not embraced, so this key is spacing and embracing. When these parts are not acknowledged and embraced, they come out sideways. So in our self-care journey, um, I imagine most of us have experiences of recognizing the ways that we may be self-sabotaging or that we've been having these intentions to create these new habits or behaviors, and we just keep finding that we can't sustain them, and it's baffling to us. And we might, interpret that or internalize that again with sort of the shame or the self-judgmental voices, when in reality, like what is going on is that there's some parts, some unconscious, shadowy parts that are needing some attending and some love. And these can be, from our childhood, wounded parts. It can be from significant traumas as well, or just, things that were modeled for us. And and when we have the support or a process to hold us and being able to bring these parts that have been sort of in the shadows or unconscious to us into the light and actually have a direct relationship with them where we can bring our curiosity and our love and care, that these are parts of us, it's all part of who we are. Um, and we can embrace them and integrate them in a conscious way. We find that some of those ways that we've been treating ourselves unkindly, um, exacerbating that sense of there being something wrong, or, all the voices that tell us I can never do this, or yeah, this, yeah, yeah, I need to hide this from everyone, like we all have those different parts or behaviors that it's like, yeah, we sort of don't feel like they're okay to bring out into the open and share with ourselves even or others. Um, that once those are embraced, we find just a freedom and an opening and a capacity to actually move forward with intention and feel, yeah, more grounded and skillful and capable in sustaining the changes we seek. And that whole realm, it's complex, and I was trying to just sort of synthesize it a bit, but there's so much to it, and it's one of the huge missing pieces in our self-care journeys, and really requires a lot of attention, which is why it became key number two in my book, is it's like it's underlying everything if we're not attending to these parts, these shadowy parts of ourselves.
Yeah, I've done a lot of shadow work myself, and it's played a key role, in my last 7 years of personal growth. And I think it's something, that wasn't modeled to me or talked about. So I'm so glad that these days there's conversations around that. There's people teaching it, there's people working with it, there's, it's popping up here and there in more ways. So, and definitely one of the things, like you said earlier, that what was missing, things that we weren't taught. So it's really nice that you included that in your book, because I think it does play a role, and especially in our physical bodies. When I have my clients show up and they're on the table, it's stuffed in different areas of the body. And anytime we have an emotion and we're not dealing with it, or we don't have awareness around it, it goes in the body. And, I'd had, a session the other day, I, I want, I like to practice like client confidentiality and be very vague. But there's organs, that pop up in the body that if we're not dealing with specific emotions, they can show up anywhere. Our intestines, our kidneys, our stomach, you know, chest pain, shoulder pain. I noticed even with myself, like there's this piece of the masculine that I'm integrating right now where I don't have to be in so much control in my life, and I can just surrender and kind of have some faith and belief that everything is unfolding the way that it should be. And it's showing up in my shoulder, and, it shows up in our body. So I'm glad that we're having these conversations and like looking at this, and that you included that in your book. What's another key that kind of goes along with this or piggybacks on it?
Hmm. That piggybacks on key number two, or just, yeah, yeah. Um, well, I think, I mean, what comes to mind first is key number one, which is honoring your unique life. So to me, that's another very foundational piece that is missing. For so many of us, self-care becomes about like the to-do list, and it creates, it can create this stress where it's like all these things I'm supposed to be doing to be healthy. And that in and of self becomes unhealthy, our relationship with that. And if we can shift kind of the deeper foundational relationship with how we care for ourselves to one where we're cultivating more of a day-to-day recognition and remembrance that, oh my God, I am alive and in a body. I don't know how long I'm going to be alive. It's just really being in direct contact with our mortality consciously. Like, I don't know how long I'm going to be alive. Days, weeks, months, many years. Like, and to live from that place of recognizing the honor and the privilege to be the one that's responsible for this unique body being person, that no one else is me in this whole world or will ever be me. And to drop into that in a felt sense, it's like we can speak to that and know that, but like to really drop in and feel that. And from there, our relationship with caring for ourselves becomes about deep love and reverence and kindness and attending, like a gardener does, to their plants, where it's like attending to this life energy that it's like we're each here to express and be in our own uniqueness, and that just keeps evolving and changing throughout our lives. And um, yeah, so I really like to bring attention to that, as a foundation for what it is we're even talking about, because from there, that spirit of kind, loving care can be brought into our exploration of our shadows, because that requires, like I was speaking to before, a lot of love and presence to attend to and embrace those parts that have been disowned. And so if we are already grounded in cultivating that deeper relationship with what it is to steward and guide these lives of ours, um, yeah, um, it can bring an energy of attention and investment in that journey that, yeah, can bring us through the times that are hard or require us to feel things that we might not want to be feeling and owning.
Mhm. I love that. Yeah. You, me, everyone, we're such individual people and we don't all fit in boxes, like culture wants us to. And it's good to remember that we are unique and this life is a gift and it's so beautiful. And you're right, we don't know how much time we have here and we want to live it in, the best way that we can and find the joy that we can in life. And you have 9 keys altogether. And I think one of my favorites is key number 4, cultivating resilience, because that resilience helps us, find that vitality or continue to find vitality and joy in our lives. So, talk about key number 4.
Yeah. Yeah, well, resilience, I think, is key. I mean, particularly with, I mean, the craziness of of life these days, the fullness for all of us, and all that, yeah, in our personal lives and our collective world. And it's just like there's so much that we're bombarded with. And life is unpredictable. I think that's a key part of relating to resilience is life is unpredictable. We may feel like we have our act together, we've got our routines down, our habits that work for us, and then bam, something in life happens. And yeah, the rug gets pulled out from underneath us, and a significant loss, or yeah, a pivot, in our work, or a relationship. It's just like so many things happen all the time in our lives that we just don't have control over. And resilience is what allows us to find our way back, when we get sideswiped, find our way back to a place of feeling our ground and our capacity to support our own thriving in the midst of whatever is going on, and to have the flexibility and adaptability to do so in a way that continues to evolve with who we are evolving to be and what our life circumstances are. Yeah, so in terms of like the orientation of basic life skills we were never taught, it's like this is one of them. Like this is, the skill of really being able to discern, and come from the grounding of our own self-knowing, those cultivating those other first 3 keys that allows us to then choose like, okay, like I really want to learn more about this capacity. I want to learn more about this. I'm going to get some support from this person. And so on the outside, it can kind of look a little bit about like our self-care to-do list, but it's actually coming from a deeper place of self-knowing and commitment to our own thriving, where we recognize like, yeah, like I want to have more capacity, in my strength of my body, as just one example. And so from that place of really owning my own autonomy in this way, I'm gonna like seek out some of these different things to learn and some professional support to help with that. So I learned that. And then, yeah, and then we turn, into a different direction for support in our lives. But it's from that orientation that we're building these capacities to allow us that flexibility and adaptability with the unpredictability of life.
Yeah, it's really unpredictable these days too. Like my favorite saying these days is life is lifing. When I hear people talk,
I love that.
life is really lifing right now. to kind of have a sense of
Yeah.
humor about it too, because it's a lot. There's a lot going on right now. And do you have
Yeah.
any suggestions for people who are like really just in it and something has, popped up for them? Do you have any in the moment things that we can do to help with with our resiliency?
Yeah, I mean, one key piece of that that's sort of underlying everything is learning how to regulate our nervous systems. So having some simple practices that we can do anywhere, anytime to shift our nervous system from that fight or flight, go, go, go place back down into more of that rest and relax place of the parasympathetic nervous system. It's just being able to do that throughout our days is really key. And, I like to, just really acknowledge that we're all different and different practices and techniques will resonate with different people. So I'll just throw out, a couple here. One very simple one that you can do anytime, anywhere is simply slowing down your breath rate. So you can even just count to 5 or 6 as you breathe in, and 5 or 6 as you breathe out. And even doing that for 30 seconds or a minute can really just bring you back down into that slower internal space in the nervous system. you know, for other people, I mean, you can do that anywhere. And other people, it's like bringing attention to your bottoms of your feet, really opening to all the sensations that you can feel on the bottoms of your feet. It's like it sort of energetically grounds you by bringing your awareness down there. Um, One of my favorite things is going outside in nature and simply slowly just like allowing my senses to take in the sounds and the smells and the sights, just tuning into the minutia of just the little details all around. And again, none of those practices need to take much time. So I think one of the things that we can tell ourselves when we're in that frenetic state is that, yeah, we don't have enough time to care for ourselves, or we don't have enough time to, yeah, slow down. But you take 1 minute or a few minutes for these kinds of practices, and as your body state shifts into that more relaxed nervous system, the perspectives shift. And yeah, sort of our capacity to be with the complexities and the fullness of everything we're navigating widens and opens.
Mhm. I love that. Thank you. Those are really helpful. And, going out in nature and having a walk or just sitting and closing my eyes with the sun on my face and just listening to the sounds around me is really grounding. And definitely like even in the thick of it, in the moment, if, I've got something difficult going on, taking that pause and just like shifting my awareness out of the charge and into my breath is really helpful. So thank you for bringing both of those up. That also
Yeah.
like brings up key number 6, experimenting with our playful curiosity, because I think that humor, that playfulness is really important. So share with our listeners a little bit about key number 6.
Yeah. I love this key. This is one of my favorites. Yeah, it always brings a smile to my face. Just I love how it just it takes the seriousness out of our relationship with self-care, because I think whether we're conscious of it or not, so many of us like end up with sort of this rule book and this right or wrong of what we're supposed to be doing, and kind of get stuck in sort of a rigid relationship with our self-care. And that's kind of the antithesis of life, as we've been talking about. It's like life just keeps changing. We keep evolving. Our circumstances change. Everything keeps changing. So it's like we need to be in a relationship of caring for ourselves that can also evolve and flex and move too. So this key, experimenting with playful curiosity, is about orienting towards the changes that we're seeking from an experimental point of view. Like we try things out and we're curious. We watch what happens, and we open into kind of a playfulness with it of, oh, what's going to happen if I try this, and see what happens. And then from there, it's like if it doesn't really go how we imagined, we learn from that. So it's like the orientation of being an active learner in our own lives. So not taking it as a failure, but oh, okay, that didn't work so well. Let's try this instead. So experiment. And it's just like it keeps you in movement and it keeps it light and fun. And like we're actively learning how to care for ourselves in this moment in time because something that worked a few years ago might not work anymore. Um, and then the playfulness too, it's like also just remembering, like, again, this connects back to key number one of just like, yeah, we have this one, as Mary Oliver, the one wild, precious life, it's just like to really like be in this cherishing of our lives and to let ourselves have fun, yes, there's serious things in life. We're surrounded by it. We're embedded in so much that's really serious. So how can we like choose on purpose to bring more play and fun and joyfulness just for the sake of it into our lives and to bring that spirit into just our ride of, how we're caring for and moving through this life.
Oh, I love that. And I like that you pointed out, it can be so serious. I was thinking that while you were talking, like the world, life can be so serious. If we get curious, then we kind of step out of that seriousness and kind of step back into that playfulness too, like, but what if? Right? Because I know my Capricorn self can be very serious. So, and that's one of the things I've had to work on throughout my life is like being playful, being curious instead of being so like grounded and serious about everything. Because I could totally slip into that. And I love, love the curiosity aspect of it because then it like kind of brings out that inner child me that kind of wants to play and be curious about what's going on and look at things from different perspectives. So I really appreciate that one, the key number 6. And number 7, the next one is discovering easeful discipline. So I think that
Yeah.
that's a great segue into that one. I think you set these guys up really well, or these keys up really well. Also trying to train myself out of that old East Coast saying, you guys, it's a work in progress.
I have that
But yeah,
too.
discovering our easeful discipline, like key number 7. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. Well, first, I guess I want to pause because a lot of times when people hear the word discipline, it's immediately like clamp down. It feels like the opposite of what we were just talking about. Yeah, it brings this seriousness, this rigidity, the self-judgmental, critical voices come on board. And so, yeah, what I'm introducing here actually dovetails and combines with the previous key, like they work together. So, yeah, so discovering easeful discipline, is about really getting into an orientation, from key number one, like having our own back, really doing so with love and care. And so when we really like have that sense of commitment to ourselves and to whatever it is we're wanting to change, like we deepen that commitment by adding in really conscious strategy. So looking at like what we view as obstacles, like what shows up when we're trying to create these changes that we're seeking that seems to, get in the way or we view as self-sabotage or whatever. So maybe there's some shadowy stuff. But there's also what I've come to call, and I heard this term, I'm forgetting years ago, and I've adopted it, the competing commitments. It was from Harvard researchers, and I'm forgetting their names right now. But competing commitments, which basically are other needs we have that show up in opposition to whatever need it is we're trying to attend to. So when we actually make those conscious and we name them and we create experiments to attend to them too, they stop being obstacles. And then the third part of the useful discipline is that we create structures of support for ourselves. So whether it's people, whether it's programs, whether it's reminders around our house or calendar reminders, things to really keep us in that orientation and mindset to create the change. And we combine that with that, playful experimentation and curiosity. And then we just learn as we go. So we create an experiment with those extra parameters around it to really anchor in that, yeah, it takes some time to shift habits, weeks. Some people say months, so it takes time to get past that initial uncomfortable time of the habit change. Um, so we need discipline as a way to hold us through that commitment. And then when we get to the other side, we get to learn like, okay, that worked really well, or actually I'll change this thing for my next experiment, or change the parameters in these ways. So the two go together. And then it becomes sort of playful and enjoyable, and we're learning as we go.
I love that you made it like an experiment because we can be so serious about it. When we're trying to implement
Yeah.
a new habit and like, oh my gosh, I ran out of time again. I'm not going to be able to do this, or I really wanted to do my short yoga practice or try Tai Chi or whatever it might be that we're trying to add. And we can kind of beat ourselves up about it. So it's nice to have that switch in perspective to, okay, I'm going to experiment with my schedule. I'm going to see what works and see what happens, kind of, and getting curious about like, okay, where do these changes fit in my life? What can I do? And kind of like I keep hearing like letting ourselves off the hook. And also that doesn't have to
Yes.
be serious either. We can just make that an
Yes.
experiment. So what do you
Yes. I,
recommend
I
for
love that.
people?
Yeah.
Go
What were
ahead,
you
you were
saying?
saying.
Oh, I love the letting ourselves off the hook. Yeah, just that feels like so vital to this whole process is like it's because that's being kind to ourselves and yeah, and really allowing ourselves to learn and be, like the beginner beginner in the process, right? That's why I love the orientation of basic life skills. We were never taught like, okay, take that pressure off. Let yourself off the hook and just allow yourself to learn and grow and come to know what works for you, what doesn't, and know that's going to be an ongoing journey because everything's going to keep changing.
Oh,
Yeah.
true, true. And it does too. As we age, everything just changes. And it's okay to welcome the change. Yeah. So what do you have if somebody's like, oh my gosh, I'm trying to like implement these things. What do I do? I'm really struggling here. Like what part of the keys would like step in for us to be able to kind of figure that out and look at it a little bit deeper and maybe find the source as to why, we're not able to implement these things?
Mm. Yeah, well, I think part of my orientation is like to yeah, sort of get out of the orientation of there being a quick fix that is going to necessarily be like one thing, right? Because I think we're all sort of programmed like, okay, what am I missing? Like, what's that thing that I need, And so, yeah, so what I want to almost say is like taking a step back. And, I call this the vitality map because I really feel like all these different territories are vital. It isn't just one, they all play their part. So, if we're getting stuck and we don't know why we're confused, it's like there's a deeper repatterning that's wanting to happen. And one of the things, this is key number 8, that can really support that is having some outside support. So recognizing like sometimes we can't see what we can't see, right? And that's where the shadows come in. And having someone else kind of look at it with you, look at the patterns with you, and give some outside reflection and perspective, and ask the questions that might get into some of these more unconscious patterns, can really help us get unstuck in a way that is hard to do on our own. Sometimes we can come to that, through books or podcasts, or, we might get this insight and something clicks in and it's like, ooh, I'm going to try that. And we try it and the way forward appears. But other times it's more of a bigger journey, that's wanting to happen and to, again, let ourselves off the hook, like recognize like it took a long time to get into this place. It might not be just an immediate shift. And that when we commit to that deeper foundational journey, that's going to take us, through the rest of our life. And we can get out of that boom or bust cycle that so many of us are in trying to sustain the changes we seek.
Nice. How did you do that within yourself, Dr. Deborah? How did you figure out, how to kind of repattern your life, for yourself personally?
Yeah. Um, Very humbling journey. Like I was saying, I had those 2 times of chronic fatigue. The second time after, I was already a resident, I graduated from naturopathic medical school and yeah, and so I thought I was already getting a hang of it before then, and then had this other round. And I think, that time really caused me to step back and look at like, okay, what have I been missing here? And to begin, like I think I just naturally kind of adopted an experimental orientation, like I was talking about, and trying things out and really focusing on increasing my self-awareness around what was working and what wasn't. And some of the really significant parts of my own healing journey did involve being in healing groups with other people, so facilitated processes, and having that both that really loving, nurturing support and the mutuality of healing together, while also having some mentors and health professionals offering perspectives or nudges towards areas that really were needing attending. And for me, those were some of the more shadowy parts that, like I was speaking to before with the anger and just other realms of my own healing that I hadn't known needed attention. But once I did and started opened up the energies and some of the taboos of what, um, because of how I had been patterned, I didn't feel I was able to express. And once that sort of got opened up, it's like all this life energy came. And um, yeah, so so I guess a combination, of learning organically these 9 keys for myself and it took living them for a while before and then working with people with them before I was able to actually distill them and articulate them. Um, and then, foundational for me too was inviting the support and connection to help me along my way too.
Nice. Yeah, that's usually one of the parts that we miss out because we're taught that we have to do it on our own or to be super independent or, wherever it might be. But our greatest resource is reaching out for sure. Yeah. And for somebody who's at home and they're like, oh my gosh, I'm totally resonating with this. Like, I've got this chronic fatigue. There's a lot going on in the world. There's a lot going on in my life. I can't seem to like catch up on the sleep, all like quick fixes aside, what advice would you give that person who's sitting there go like, what else can I do? Like, what do I do with this?
Mm,
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah. I, I would say, well, I mean, a couple things come to mind. One, you can read my book as a way to the vitality map to begin to kind of seed some new awarenesses and perspectives that might be different than what you've already been trying. Because I know it can feel with chronic fatigue and other illnesses. Like it's like I've tried everything. Like I've gone to all these different professionals and tried all of these different modalities and supplements and medicines and nothing's working. And so sometimes just kind of stepping back and kind of looking at a bigger picture or maybe seeing some perspectives that are new can be helpful. And and then I think too, along with that, like I was just saying, like um, finding a professional or professionals or a group that resonate that can kind of help you get to those underneath layers. It's when we're stuck on our own, like we were just saying, like, it can be really hard sometimes to find our way out without leaning in for support and to really I really want to normalize that we all need that. We're relational creatures. We're not meant to do it on our own. And um, and just the importance of that. But it's important to find people, whether they're professionals or otherwise, that we feel safe with to expose our more vulnerable parts or the parts that, we feel ashamed about or those judgmental parts of ourselves that like it actually feels like a safe container for us to expose those parts. Because if we don't feel that way, it can end up, sort of actually escalating and causing more harm. So discernment with who we lean into is absolutely essential.
Beautiful. Thank you, Dr. Deborah, for sharing that. And I think we have one more key left, key nine, living like you matter. And I love that. I remember I was waiting tables not too long ago and before lockdown, and someone slipped a little card and we put our receipts in these boxes. And when I opened up the box, it was this little laminated card that said, "You matter." And I think,
Oh,
it's important to not
mm,
only feel that, but to let other people know that they matter too. So a little bit about living like you matter, key number 9.
yeah, yeah, that's really touching that someone did that for you.
Okay.
Yeah, living like you matter for me just brings everything we've been talking about full circle. So it's really about living from a place where we prioritize ourselves, caring for ourselves as much as we prioritize caring for anyone else or the world around us, that we actually recognize that filling our own well is absolutely essential to be able to show up in service and support of others, whether it be our families, our loved ones, or the broader world, and humanity, that we're a part of. So it's just really anchoring in, and this can be a biggie. It sounds simple as I'm saying it, but it's like it's really huge. For so many of us, like we have no problem pouring ourselves out in service and love and care for others. Meanwhile, we're completely depleted and running ourselves into the ground. So this key just really anchors in like, no, like you need to be filling your well, you need to be prioritizing care for you. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to show up in support of others. Like you matter, and no one else but you, but each of us, is here to care for this particular body and being. That's the job we were born to. And getting back to key number one, to do so, with that reverence and that honor, that it's not a burden, it's actually an amazing responsibility that's innate to us that we can honor and nurture and love and yeah, fully invest ourselves in. So that's living like you matter.
I love that, Dr. Deborah. It's been such a great conversation. I've loved all of this information. The book is great. I recommend everybody go and get it. The Vitality Map. I love the your analogy too in the beginning of the book. Can you
Mm.
share that? Because I think our listeners would appreciate, um, that comparison between the title of your book and what you talk about when you're mapping out a hiking expedition.
Oh yeah. Yeah, so yeah, I spoke to how, before I go out on a backcountry journey or a big hiking trip, I like to look at a map and just have a sense of the territory so that, yeah, I have a sense of what's coming and what to expect. But also knowing that it's like once I'm out there, it's gonna look and feel completely different. But there's yeah, having that grounding of that knowing and the map to bring with me allows me to have that tool with me that if I need to redirect once I'm out there, I have that. And so the vitality map is really that. It like provides that broad territory, and each of the keys I kind of think of as like stakes in the ground, sort of marking the territory. And it's not the territory of your life, it's not who you uniquely are, but it gives you a sense of where it's possible to go. Because sometimes when we haven't actually lived it or been exposed to it, it's like we don't even know it exists until it's there on a map and or someone points the way and says, "Yes, I've done that, and it's right over there, and this is how you get there." So the map is kind of meant to be that to provide a resource of these basic life skills, these perspectives and orientations that you can try on and practice for yourself and really make it your own. Because again, we're each so unique. So this isn't like a protocol of trying to fit yourself into a box or be like anyone else. It's about really making it individual to you. And the keys are described and meant to be that to really be uh, um, yeah, sort of to map the territory of what's possible for you to explore.
Nice. Love that analogy. Thanks for sharing that. And how can people find you? How can they find the book?
Yeah, if you go to vitalmedicine.com, that's my website, and you'll see up top on the menu, there's a link for the books. I have a new book coming out next month, the Vitality Journal, which will be kind of a personalized internal process, journaling through the 9 keys. But the Vitality Map is on there with all the links of where you can get it. And it's available in audiobook and ebook and paperback.
Awesome. Thanks, Dr. Deborah. And I like to ask my guests one final question. What is the jewel of wisdom you would like to leave our audience with today?
Yeah. I mean, I think what just stuck with me was what we were just talking about recently, that you matter. You matter. Your well-being matters. Your vitality matters. And I really wish, for all of us to live that way.
Yes, love that. You matter, everybody, and your vitality matters. Dr. Deborah, thanks for joining me on Raise the Vibe with Liz. I really appreciated you coming on the show and sharing.
Thanks so much for having me, Liz. Yeah.
Awesome. And thank you, everyone, for joining us. Again, I'm Liz Peterson, and you can find everything about me at raisethevibe.com. And remember to check out Dr. Deborah's new book, The Vitality Map, and her upcoming journal. And you can find her at vitalmedicine.com. Thanks, everybody. And remember to get out there and raise the vibe. Have a great day. Bye, everybody.